The Marines were proving themselves to be an excellent force for quick deployment against hostile forces. In 1846, that meant war with Mexico and the roots of the line from the Marine Corps hymn, "From the halls of Montezuma." 200 Marines were assigned to the Division of the Army under Major General John Quitman. General Quitman wrote, 2 weeks after the capture of Mexico City,
"At dawn on the morning of the 13th, the batteries again opened an active and effective fire upon the castle, which was returned by the enemy with spirit and some execution. During this cannonade, active preparations were made for the assault on the castle. Ladders, pickaxes, and crows were placed in the hands of a pioneer storming party of select men from the Volunteer Division, under command of Captain Reynolds of the Marine Corps, to accompany the storming party of 120 men, which had been selected from all the corps of the same division, and placed under the command of Major Twiggs of the Marines. The storming parties, led by the gallant officers who had volunteered for this desperate service, rushed forward like a resistless tide. The Mexicans, behind their batteries and breastworks, stood with more than usual firmness. For a short time, the contest was hand-to-hand. Swords and bayonets were crossed and rifles clubbed. Resistance, however, was vain against the desperate valor of our brave troops. The batteries and strong works were carried, and the ascent of Chapultepec on that side laid open to an easy conquest. In these works were taken 7 pieces of artillery, 1,000 muskets, and 550 prisoners, of whom 100 were officers, among them 1 general and 10 colonels. The command of the storming party from the Volunteer Division devolved on Captain James Miller of the 2nd Pennsylvania Regiment by the death of its chief, the brave and lamented Twiggs of the Marine Corps, who fell on the first advance at the head of his command.
In 1875, History of the United States Marine Corps described the Marines' assignment to sweep clean the halls of Montezuma following the capture of the city.
The Marines accompanied their division in all its progress and participated in the long and bloody battle by which finally the avenue to the city was opened. The palace was overrun with escaped convicts and other desperate characters bent on plunder. Lieutenant Colonel Watson, with his battalion of Marines, was ordered to clear it of these intruders and protect it from spoliation, which duty he promptly and successfully performed.
Another tradition, rooted in this Mexican-American War, is the supposed origin for the red stripes on the trousers of Marine officers and NCOs. Legend has it that the stripe represents the blood shed by Marines battling before Chapultepec and commemorates the bravery and tenacity of those men. The war with Mexico was won, but it would only aggravate the political situation in the United States, where the struggle between slave states and free soilers was already turning bloody. In 1859, Commandant General Archibald Henderson would die in office, having spent a lifetime developing a better trained and more disciplined, courageous, and effective Marine Corps. The Marines would feel his loss, but he himself was spared from seeing what was to come as the nation tore itself apart in civil war. Actually, the Marines' involvement started before the war, at the event that many said made the Civil War inevitable. On October 16, 1859, John Brown led a small force of armed men in the capture of the arsenal at Harper's Ferry. The new commandant of the Marines, Colonel John Harris, ordered a force of Marines into action under First Lieutenant Israel Green. Overall command of the mission fell to Army Colonel Robert E. Lee. When Brown's force refused to surrender peacefully, Green led his Marines into action. Green later reported,
"The men made a tremendous assault upon the door. The second blow broke it in. This entrance was a ragged hole low down in the right-hand door, the door being splintered and cracked some distance upward. I instantly stepped from my position in front of the stone abutment and entered the opening."
Green found John Brown, reloading his carbine, having just fired a shot that missed Green.
I brought my saber down with all my strength upon his head. He was moving as the blow fell, and I suppose I did not strike him where I intended, for he received a deep saber cut in the back of the neck. He fell senseless on his side, then rolled over on his back. He had in his hand a short, sharp cavalry carbine. I think he had just fired, for the Marine who followed me into the aperture made by the ladder received a bullet in the abdomen, from which he died in a few minutes. Instinctively, as Brown fell, I gave him a saber thrust in the left breast. The sword I carried was a light uniform weapon, and, either not having a point or striking something hard in Brown's accoutrements, did not penetrate. The blade bent double. By that time, 3 or 4 of my men were inside. They came rushing in like tigers, as a storming assault is not a play-day sport. They bayoneted one man skulking under the engine and pinned another fellow up against the rear wall, both being instantly killed. I ordered the men to spill no more blood. The other insurgents were at once taken under arrest, and the contest ended.
So the first Marine was killed before the Civil War had even begun. But he would not be the last. 44 Marines would be killed at the first Battle of Bull Run on July 21st, 1861. Only 353 Marines were with the 35,000-man Union force in that battle, which became an ignominious defeat. Most of the Marines that day, like most of the Union forces in general, were inexperienced and raw. When the battle turned so badly and the Union forces fled the field, the Marines ran with them. Commandant Colonel Harris reported the action to the Secretary of the Navy, saying it was the first instance in Marine Corps history where any portion of its members turned their backs to the enemy. Throughout most of the war, Marines were primarily used in their traditional role as naval and amphibious combat troops. One such action occurred in May 1862. 5 Union ships drove up the James River, straight at the Confederate capital of Richmond. They encountered fierce resistance from Fort Darling on Drury's Bluff, about 7 miles south of Richmond. For his actions that day, Marine Corporal John Mackey became the first Marine to receive the Medal of Honor. But despite that honor and the actions of Marines like him, the Marines remain a very small part of the U.S. military. During the war, its maximum strength remained below 4,200 men and had only 148 combat casualties. Clearly, the nation's political and military leaders had not yet settled on an effective use of this effective fighting force.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to help us produce more compelling historical content like this, please like, comment below, and share this video with fellow history buffs. And of course, be sure to subscribe to help keep history happening.